Angela and Santiago's perfect home. Angela and Santiago were the typical couple admired by everyone. They lived in a cozy and welcoming house in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by friends and family who always saw them as the perfect example of love and dedication. The house, which had been chosen with such care by the two, reflected the affection and attention they put into every detail of their life together. The front garden was always well kept, with colorful flowers that Angela lovingly planted. The interior walls, painted in soft tones, reflected the peace and harmony that they both cultivated in their marriage. When Angela discovered that she was pregnant, her joy was immense. Santiago, who had always wanted to be a father, was thrilled to see the positive test. The news was celebrated with an intimate dinner, followed by a call to their closest family to share the good news. The pregnancy brought a special glow to their marriage, as if the bond between them had become even stronger. Santiago became even more attentive to Angela, always concerned about her well-being, while she dedicated herself to preparing the home for the baby's arrival. Their relationship seemed rock solid, and the future looked bright. They imagined the baby running around the house, filling every room with babyish laughter. Plans for the baby's room became the focus of their attention. They chose neutral colors, light wood furniture, and decorated with delicate themes that evoked nature. Every night before bed, they talked about what life would be like after the arrival of their child, the joys and challenges they would face together. However, as the pregnancy progressed, Angela began to feel tired and the changes in her body. The morning sickness, constant nausea, and swelling began to take a toll on her energy. Santiago, realizing that his wife was overwhelmed, suggested that they ask for help. Angela was reluctant at first, having always been independent, but Santiago's insistence and the well-being of the baby convinced her. So, they decided to invite Carolina, Angela's cousin, to stay with them for a while and help with the housework. Carolina's arrival, the cousin who would change everything. Carolina, a 25-year-old girl, was the opposite of Angela in many ways. While Angela had a calmer and more reserved personality, Carolina was outgoing, charismatic, and possessed a beauty that did not go unnoticed. Her arrival brought a new energy to the house. She was spontaneous, always bringing a laugh or a funny story to share. Angela, happy to have her cousin's company, saw in her a great help and a source of emotional support. Carolina was like a sister to Angela. They grew up together, sharing secrets, dreams, and important moments. When Angela got married, Carolina was there, smiling, as one of the bridesmaids. They had a special connection, a bond that seemed unbreakable. When Angela asked her to come and help during the pregnancy, Carolina accepted without hesitation, happy to be able to reciprocate the affection she had always received. In the first few days, Carolina's presence was a relief for Angela. She helped with the housework, prepared nutritious and delicious meals, and spent hours talking to her cousin, offering support and distraction during the most difficult moments of the pregnancy. Santiago, in turn, was grateful for the help. He knew that Angela was in good hands while he was working. However, as time went on, Santiago began to see Carolina in a different way. It was as if his eyes had suddenly been opened to something he had not noticed before. The way Carolina moved around the house, her infectious laugh, the way she always found something positive in every situation began to occupy his thoughts. He found himself increasingly interested in their conversations, more attentive to details, like the perfume she wore or the way her hair fell over her shoulders. Santiago tried to push these thoughts away, convincing himself that they were just passing illusions, but Carolina's constant presence made it difficult. Carolina, on the other hand, noticed that Santiago was more present, more attentive. At first, she thought he was just being nice, but over time, the lingering glances and conversations they had when Angela wasn't around began to awaken a strange feeling in her. She tried to ignore it, remembering the love that Angela and Santiago shared, but there was something undeniable in the way Santiago looked at her, something that made Carolina feel a mix of discomfort and curiosity. Santiago's uncontrollable desire, the first step towards the abyss. Santiago struggled against the feelings that began to grow inside him. Every time he looked at Carolina, he felt an attraction that confused and disturbed him. He knew it was wrong, he knew he was married to Angela and that they were expecting a child, but Carolina's constant closeness, her youth and the natural charm she exuded were like a flame he couldn't extinguish. At first, he tried to rationalize it, telling himself that it was just a passing attraction, something that would fade with time. But instead of diminishing, the desire only grew. Every time Angela wasn't around, Santiago felt an almost uncontrollable need to get closer to Carolina, to hear her voice, to be by her side. He found himself imagining what it would be like if he could touch her, feel the warmth of her skin, and these fantasies began to take over his mind, invading his thoughts even when he was with Angela. Carolina, although she tried to remain aloof, also began to feel something. There was a tension in the air, a tension that she couldn't ignore. She felt flattered by Santiago's attention, but also confused and guilty. Carolina had always admired Santiago, considering him an honest man and a devoted husband, but the way he looked at her, the smiles he gave her, made her heart beat faster, leaving her torn between desire and loyalty to her cousin. Santiago's internal conflict was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. He knew he was playing with fire, but the temptation was too strong to ignore. At night, when he was alone, Santiago blamed himself for allowing these thoughts to take over, but during the day, when Carolina was around, all his resolutions seemed to dissipate. He began to find excuses to spend more time with her, to have conversations that lasted longer than necessary, to get closer, even if only subtly. The situation reached a critical point when, one afternoon when Angela was resting, Santiago found Carolina in the kitchen. She was distracted, preparing a snack, and he approached her without her noticing. The sweet perfume she wore filled the air, and Santiago, moved by an uncontrollable impulse, placed his hand over hers. Carolina jumped, surprised by the touch, but did not immediately pull her hand away. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something changed. The tension that had been growing between them finally manifested itself in a tangible way. Santiago, realizing what he had done, quickly retreated, but the damage was done. Carolina, with her heart racing, left the kitchen in a hurry, feeling the weight of what had just happened. That simple touch had broken the barrier they had both been trying to maintain, and now, everything was on the verge of falling apart. The irresistible proposal, Santiago can't wait any longer. After that moment in the kitchen, Santiago knew he could no longer ignore what he felt for Carolina. He tried to convince himself that he could leave things as they were, that he could continue living with Angela without anything else happening, but the truth was that he couldn't stop thinking about Carolina. The nights became unbearable, with Santiago tossing and turning in bed, while Angela slept peacefully next to him, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions he felt. Finally, Santiago decided he had to act. He knew it was wrong, that he was about to betray Angela's trust irreparably, but the urge to be with Carolina was too strong to ignore. He began to plan how he could create a situation where they would be alone, without Angela's presence for the irresistible proposal. Santiago can't wait any longer. After the tense moment in the kitchen, Santiago realized he could no longer ignore his feelings for Carolina. The nights became unbearable, with Santiago tossing and turning in bed, disturbed by his growing desire. Angela, oblivious to her husband's inner turmoil, slept peacefully beside him, and this only intensified Santiago's conflict. He was fighting an irresistible force, a deep and insatiable desire that seemed to grow with each passing day. The thought of being with Carolina began to dominate his thoughts. He tried to rationalize, convincing himself that he could continue with his normal life with Angela, but the idea of being with Carolina wouldn't leave his mind. Santiago began to make discreet plans to create a situation in which he could be alone with Carolina. He tried to find justifications for moments when Angela wasn't around, taking advantage of any opportunity to be alone with his cousin. His strategy involved small lies and excuses to leave the house or work later. He began to act with an intensity that he himself didn't understand, as if he were in a race against time to fulfill his desires before it was too late. One day, while Angela was out with friends and the baby was with the babysitter, Santiago saw a perfect opportunity. He created a situation in which Carolina and he would be alone in the house for a few hours. The tension in the air was palpable, and each second seemed to carry an immense emotional weight. Carolina, who felt the growing pressure of the situation, tried to maintain her composure, but her nerves were on edge. Santiago was determined to take advantage of that moment to express his feelings. When Carolina entered the room, she found Santiago waiting for her, with a look in his eyes that she had never seen before. The room was silent, except for the sound of the clock on the wall, which seemed to mark each passing second with increasing weight. Santiago, with a nervous smile, began the conversation, trying to disguise the intensity of his feelings. He spoke about how Carolina's presence had brought joy and lightness to his life, and how he was surprised by the strength of the feelings he had begun to have for her. His words came out with a mixture of desire and desperation, as if he were trying to justify something that, deep down, he knew was wrong. Carolina, listening to Santiago's words, felt a mix of emotions. There was something seductive in the way he spoke, but at the same time, she felt great guilt and confusion. She knew that this was a dangerous path, that she was about to cross a line that should never be crossed. Her mind was at war, fighting between desire and loyalty to her cousin. The moment culminated when Santiago, unable to control his impulses any longer, approached Carolina and kissed her. The kiss was intense, passionate, and filled with a need that had been repressed for a long time. Carolina tried to resist, but the attraction between them was irresistible. When they finally pulled away, they were both panting, their hearts racing. The reality of what they had done crashed over them like an overwhelming wave. Santiago, now consumed by guilt, tried to comfort Carolina, promising that he would do whatever it took to deal with the consequences. He was desperate to keep what he had with Carolina, but he was also aware that the situation was about to become much more complicated. Carolina, feeling torn, began to understand the depth of the mistake she had made. The confrontation, Angela discovers the truth. Life continued as usual until one day, the truth began to come to light. Angela was increasingly suspicious. She noticed small changes in Santiago and Carolina's behavior, and although she tried to ignore her instincts, a growing sense of distrust began to take hold of her. One day, after a social event, Angela found a message on Santiago's phone that left her deeply uneasy. It was an exchange of messages between him and Carolina, full of words and phrases that clearly indicated a closer relationship than she had imagined. Angela was devastated and her heart raced. What had once seemed like a simple suspicion had now become a painful reality. With her mind full of questions and her heart broken, Angela decided to confront Santiago. The moment of confrontation was charged with emotion and tension. Angela demanded explanations, with tears in her eyes and her voice shaking with anger and pain. Santiago tried to explain himself, saying that it was a mistake and that he didn't know how he had let it happen, but his words seemed empty and without conviction. Angela's pain was palpable, and the shock of discovering that her husband had betrayed her trust with her own cousin was almost unbearable. She felt betrayed and disrespected, and what had been a loving relationship was now in ruins. The confrontation not only revealed the betrayal, but also exposed the fragility of the bond that Angela believed to be indestructible. Carolina, when called to the confrontation, tried to explain herself, but her justifications sounded weak in the face of the intensity of the situation. Angela looked at her with disappointment and sadness, and what had previously been a relationship of closeness and affection turned into an emotional battlefield. The tension in the room was unbearable, and what remained of a friendship that seemed unbreakable was about to fall apart completely. The apology and the consequences. After the confrontation, Santiago and Carolina found themselves facing the consequences of their actions. Santiago, remorseful and devastated, tried desperately to redeem himself, promising Angela that he would do whatever it took to regain her trust. But the truth was that the damage had been done, and the trust that Angela had placed in him was irrevocably broken. Carolina, in turn, was forced to face the reality of her actions. She realized that her actions had not only hurt Angela, but had also compromised her own character and values. Feeling guilty and ashamed, Carolina decided to walk away, seeking to find a new path for herself. She knew that she could not repair the damage that had been done, but she was willing to do whatever she could to try to redeem herself. Santiago and Angela's marriage had gone through an extremely difficult period. The pain and betrayal had left deep scars, and rebuilding the relationship required a colossal effort from both of them. Santiago began seeking therapy to understand his actions and try to heal the wounds caused, while Angela faced her own feelings of betrayal and loss. The rebuilding process was not easy. Each step was marked by challenges and moments of pain, but despite everything, they were both willing to try. The decision to stay together or not was a crucial turning point. The road to reconciliation was long and required patience, understanding, and a deep commitment on both sides. The impact on the lives of everyone involved. As time passed, the lives of everyone involved began to change. Santiago and Angela tried to rebuild their relationship based on honesty and mutual effort. They began to dedicate more time to each other, to seek out activities that brought them together, and to work on the areas that needed more attention. Carolina, on the other hand, followed her own path, trying to find inner peace and redeem herself from her mistakes. The experience left a deep impression on her, and she used this pain to grow and evolve. Facing the guilt and shame, Carolina began to rebuild her own life, learning from her mistakes and seeking a new purpose. The baby, who was the center of Angela and Santiago's world, brought a new perspective to their lives. He became a symbol of hope and renewal, a constant reminder of the love and family that they still valued. Caring for the baby brought challenges, but also immense joys, and the couple worked hard to ensure that the child grew up in a healthy and loving environment. The story of Santiago, Angela, and Carolina became a powerful reminder that choices and actions have profound consequences. Each of the characters had to face their own internal and external battles, and learn to deal with the repercussions of their decisions. Lessons learned and the hope for a better future. This story of love and life is a reflection on the complexity of human emotions, the weaknesses and strengths that shape our lives. Betrayal and deceit tested Santiago and Angela's relationship, but also provided the opportunity for new understanding and personal growth. Carolina, in seeking her own redemption, reminded everyone that the path to recovery is often difficult, but possible. While the path to recovery and reconciliation was fraught with challenges, the story offers insight into how to face adversity and seek a better future. The experience left its mark, but it also provided opportunities for learning and renewal. And so, even in the face of hardship, there is always hope for a better tomorrow, where the lessons learned can light the way for a new journey.